If you are chasing $1 million in your super because you think that is the magic number for a comfortable retirement in Australia, you are aiming at a target that has already moved. Here is the math nobody puts on the slide. At an average inflation rate of 2.5%, $1 million sitting in your account 20 years from now will only buy what $610,000 buys you today. Same balance on the screen. A very different life once you try to spend it. The financial industry loves the word millionaire. It sells headlines, it sells fear, it sells the idea that anything less is falling short. What rarely gets said is that ASFA, the industry's own retirement standard body, puts the comfortable lifestyle for a couple at $690,000, not $1 million, and that figure already assumes a part, age pension, is topping up your income. Most people doing the math in their head forget the pension is even in the room. So here is what we are actually going to do. We are going to walk through exactly when Australians typically cross $100,000, then $500,000, then $1 million in super. And I want to show you something that surprised me the first time I saw it properly worked out. Hitting $500,000 today might already mean you have won this game, even while the headlines keep telling you that you are behind. But before we get anywhere near the $1 million club, we need to talk about the first real turning point. It is the $100,000 mark, and it is the number that quietly makes a huge share of Australians in their 50s feel like the whole thing has already gotten away from them. According to ATO and ASFA data, the median Australian man crosses $100,000 in super at 38. The median woman does not cross that same line until 43. That 5-year gap is real, and most of it comes down to time out of the paid workforce, raising kids or working part-time, not poor decisions. That gap matters because $100,000 is roughly where super stops being fragile. Below that point, admin fees and insurance premiums quietly eat a disproportionate share of whatever growth you get. The same way a small electricity bill barely moves after you switch providers, the fixed costs just eat the saving. Once your balance clears $100,000, a normal 7% market return is around $7,000 in a single year, and that finally starts to outpace the $1,000 to $1,500 a year that many accounts still lose to fees and insurance premiums. Growth stops apologizing for itself and starts compounding properly. That is the trap, and it catches people who are doing fine, not people who are behind. A lot of Australians in their 50s see a $100,000 balance, compare it in their head to some 30-year-old tech worker's account they saw mentioned online, and quietly decide the game is already over for them. So they stop paying attention. They stop topping up, not out of laziness, more a kind of quiet resignation, similar to how you might stop opening a bill once you assume there is nothing you can do about it. Say you are 55 with $100,000 in super, and you do nothing beyond what your employer already contributes. That balance still grows, just slowly. Now say you use part of the concessional contributions cap, which sits at $32,500 a year from July 2026, to add an extra $10,000 a year on top of that for 5 years. At a 7% return, that extra $10,000 a year alone grows into something close to $58,000 sitting inside your account by the time you turn 60, on top of everything that was already there. That is not a get-rich number. It is the difference between a retirement with a bit of breathing room and one where every car Joe renewal feels like a crisis. The quiet cost of the other path is that every year you leave that money out of super is a year of compounding you do not get back. It is not dramatic. Nobody sends you a letter about it. It just is not there when you need it. And by the time you notice, the 5 years you could have used are gone. You are not your balance. You are your contribution strategy. But if $100,000 is where the engine starts, $500,000 is where the math gets strange, because that is the point where the Australian government actually starts taking money away from you. By the time a lot of Australians reach $500,000 in super, they think of it as the middle of the journey, somewhere to keep pushing on from. What almost nobody explains is that $500,000 sits inside what actually behaves like an efficiency zone, close enough to the ASFA comfortable target of $630,000 for a single person and $690,000 for a couple, and right at the edge of where the age pension assets test starts to matter. This is the part that surprises people. Pushing from $500,000 up toward $1 million is often less efficient than staying closer to that first number, not more. Take a homeowner couple with $500,000 in super as their main asset. As of July 2026, the full age pension assets test cutoff for a couple who own their home sits at $499,000. That couple is barely above it, so they still receive close to the full combined pension, worth roughly $47,000 a year, on top of whatever they draw from their own $500,000. The government is effectively topping up their retirement income every fortnight. To replace that $47,000 a year purely from their own savings, using a common drawdown rule of thumb of around 5% a year, that couple would need close to $940,000 sitting in their own pension account just to generate the income the pensioned couple gets on top of a much smaller balance. Now take the same couple and imagine they had pushed on to $1,500,000 instead. Once assessable assets climb past somewhere around $1 million, the pension tapers away to nothing. That couple is funding all of their own retirement income out of a bigger pot, with no fortnightly top-up at all. They needed a noticeably larger balance just to land in a similar weekly position to the couple with a third of the money. Your electricity bill and your council rates notice do not care what your account balance says on the login screen. They care whether the money lands in your account every fortnight. That is exactly why the assets test conversation matters more than the milestone conversation. I used to think the answer here was simple. Aim for the highest number you can possibly reach. Watching how the taper actually plays out changed my mind. For a lot of people, the sweet spot sits lower than the millionaire goal, not higher, because every extra dollar past a certain point stops pulling its weight the way the earlier dollars did. There is a real trade-off hiding in this, and it is worth saying plainly. Chasing the extra $500,000 needed to go from $500,000 to $1 million might mean working another 7 years. For some people, that is worth it. For a lot of people, it means trading years of their 60s for a number that ends up replacing a pension safety net they were already going to get for less effort. None of this means $500,000 is a finish line, or that more money is somehow bad. It means the conversation should not stop at what shows up on the screen when you log in. It should include what your balance is actually doing for your fortnightly income, pension included, because that is the number you actually live on. It helps to remember the assets test does not just look at your super. It looks at nearly everything you own outside the family home, shares, savings, investment properties, even the caravan sitting in the driveway. So the $500,000 sweet spot is really about your total position at retirement, not just the number showing on your super app. So if $500,000 is the sweet spot, why does everyone keep talking about the $1 million milestone like it is the only goal worth having? Because for one specific group of people, hitting that number is not a win at all. It is closer to a trap. In 2006, $1 million was enough to buy roughly 2 median-priced houses in Melbourne. 20 years later, in the middle of 2026, that same $1 million barely buys one. The number has not changed. What it can actually buy has been cut in half. That is inflation doing exactly what inflation always does, quietly, in the background, without ever sending a warning. At an average rate of 2.5% a year, $1 million in 20 years' time buys what roughly $610,000 buys today. If you are 55 now and aiming to hit $1 million by 67, remember you are aiming at a number that will already be worth noticeably less in real terms by the time you get to spend it. The word millionaire does a lot of work in advertising and very little work in real life. Crossing $1 million in super is genuinely rare, still a small minority of accounts, well under 1 in 10. If you are chasing that number specifically because it sounds like the finish line, it helps to know how few people are actually standing at it, and how much of what they are standing on is inflated air. There is also a newer detail worth knowing if you are getting close to the very top end. The transfer balance cap, the limit on how much you can move into a tax-free pension account, sits at $2,100,000 from July 2026. And from the 1st of July 2026, Division 296 brings in an extra tax on the investment earnings inside super balances above $3 million. That threshold sits well above where most people watching this will ever land, but it is one more sign that the system treats a $1 million balance today very differently to the way the word millionaire suggests it should. I have watched people delay retirement by a year or two, chasing the last bit of a number like this, only to retire into a falling market anyway. The number rarely protects you the way people expect it to. None of this makes $1 million a bad goal. What it makes clear is that the number alone tells you very little. What matters is spendable income once you get there, not the size of the balance sitting behind the login screen. And that raises the real risk most people aiming for a big number never plan for properly. It is not falling short of $1 million. It is what happens if the market drops 20% in the exact year you decide to stop working. Picture two people, both 64, both about to retire within the year. Call them John and Sarah, both with similar balances sitting around $500,000. John has almost everything sitting in a high growth option. Markets fall 20%, the way they did in 2008, and have done more than once since. His $500,000 becomes $400,000 almost overnight. He panics because he is about to need that money to live on, and he moves what is left into cash, locking in the loss right when he can least afford to. Sarah has the same size balance, but a different structure. She keeps roughly 3 years of living expenses sitting in cash and more conservative options inside her super, with the rest still invested for growth. When the same 20% fall happens, her growth assets drop too, but she is not forced to sell any of them. She lives off the cash bucket, and whatever age pension she is entitled to while the market recovers, which historically takes around 2 years, sometimes less, sometimes longer. Nobody plans for a crash to land in their first year of retirement, but sequencing risk does not check a calendar. It can just as easily hit at 58 as it can at 68, which is exactly why the structure has to be in place before you need it, not after the market has already dropped. Bills do not pause for a bad year in the market. The council rates notice and the electricity bills still turn up whether the market is up or down 20%. That is exactly why the cash bucket matters. It is there. So a bad 12 months in the market never collides with an ordinary bill that was always going to arrive anyway. Sarah does not end up needing more money than John. She needs a structure that does not force her to sell at the worst possible moment. That is the entire difference between the two of them 12 months later. The good news is that this kind of structure is not about how much you have. It works the same way whether your balance is $300,000 or $1,300,000. So here are 3 things you can actually do about it, regardless of which number you are currently sitting on. Lever 1 is the concessional contributions cap itself. From July 2026, it sits at $32,500 a year, up from $30,000 the year before. Every dollar you put in through this cap is taxed at 15% going in, rather than your regular income tax rate, which for a lot of people in their peak earning years is a genuine gap worth using. Lever 2 is the carry forward rule. If your total super balance is under $500,000, you can use unused concessional cap space from the last 5 years all at once, not just this year's cap. For someone with a lighter contribution history, maybe through years of part-time work or running a small business, this can mean putting in a much larger lump sum in a single year than the standard cap would normally allow. Lever 3 is the downsizer contribution. If you are 55 or older and you sell a home you have owned long enough to qualify, you can each put up to $300,000 into super from these sale proceeds, completely outside the normal contribution caps. A couple selling the family home at 60 can move $600,000 into the tax-effective super environment in one transaction, money that would otherwise have just sat outside the system, earning nothing extra in tax terms. None of these three levers require you to find new income you do not already have. They are about redirecting money that is already moving through your life, whether that is proceeds from selling a house or a stronger tax position on income you already earn, into the one account where it keeps compounding without an annual tax bill chasing it down. Three levers, all real, all usable well into your 50s and 60s. And yet most people who hear all three still will not touch any of them because of one specific fear that has nothing to do with money at all. Psychologists sometimes call it one more year syndrome, the quiet fear that if you actually stop working, you will run out of money before you run out of time. It is an uncomfortable feeling, and it is completely normal. It is not a character flaw. It is what 40 years of being told to save more, spend less, and never touch the balance does to a person. You have spent close to 40 years in accumulation mode, watching a number go up. Switching to spending mode can feel like breaking a rule you did not know you had agreed to. Here is a small shift that helps. Stop staring at the total balance sitting in your account. Start looking at your fortnightly income instead. Super drawdown plus any age pension you are entitled to, added together. If that number covers your actual lifestyle, the one with real bills in it, you are not behind. You are ready, whatever the balance on the login screen happens to say. $100,000 is where the engine starts. $500,000 is the efficiency sweet spot, closer to the real target than most people realize. $1 million is a number that looks impressive on a screen, while inflation quietly eats it from the inside. None of this is about chasing a bigger headline. It is about knowing what your money actually does for you every fortnight for the rest of your life. If that is the kind of retirement planning you want more of, this is the channel for it. We do not chase myths here. We build real retirements. You are closer than you think.